My life felt like a well-oiled machine, every part of it running smoothly, every piece in its place. My career was thriving. I had worked hard to earn a leadership role at one of the most respected companies in the city. My colleagues respected me, my boss praised my work, and I genuinely enjoyed the challenges my job brought. At home, things seemed just as steady. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 5 years, and while we weren't the overly romantic type, our relationship had a rhythm that felt secure. We had built a life together that I thought worked. We were partners in every sense of the word, balancing each other's ambitions and supporting one another's goals. It started subtly, like cracks forming in a seemingly sturdy foundation. Daniel began coming home later than usual, his explanations vague but plausible. "Work's been crazy," he'd say with a tired smile, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Deadlines are killing me." I didn't question it at first. After all, I understood the demands of a busy career. But soon his late nights turned into overnight trips. When I asked for details, he'd brush me off with excuses that felt just a little too rehearsed. "You're being paranoid," he'd say whenever I pressed him. "You know how intense these projects can get." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that the man I had shared my life with couldn't possibly be hiding anything from me. Work became my escape from the creeping doubts that began to cloud my thoughts. My boss, Vanessa, was someone I admired professionally. She was sharp, ambitious, and charismatic, the kind of leader who commanded respect with every word. She had taken me under her wing early in my career, mentoring me and opening doors that might have otherwise stayed shut. But even in the workplace, I started noticing things that didn't sit right. Vanessa and Daniel had met at a company gala a year earlier, where he had been my +1. At the time, I thought nothing of their friendly conversation. Vanessa was charming with everyone, and Daniel had always been sociable. But now, looking back, certain moments replayed in my mind. Her hand lingering on his arm during a laugh, the way he seemed unusually engaged in their conversation, even the subtle glances they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. The real turning point came at a company dinner. Vanessa, always the social butterfly, had invited a group of us out to celebrate a major project milestone. Daniel joined us, as he occasionally did for these work events, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Throughout the evening, I noticed the way Vanessa seemed to focus her attention on Daniel, laughing at his jokes a little too enthusiastically, leaning in just a little too closely. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was letting my insecurities get the best of me. But then there were the stolen glances. The way Daniel's eyes would dart to Vanessa when he thought I wasn't looking. The way she seemed to meet his gaze, her smile lingering just a moment longer than necessary. That night, as we drove home, I couldn't keep the questions bottled up any longer. "Do you and Vanessa talk often?" I asked casually, trying to keep my tone neutral. Daniel frowned, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. "Not really. Just the usual work stuff when I pick you up from the office." "Why?" "Just curious," I said, forcing a smile. "You two seemed pretty friendly tonight." He shrugged, his expression carefully blank. "She's your boss, Emma. I'm just being polite." His answer should have reassured me, but it didn't. There was something in his tone, a defensiveness that felt unwarranted. Over the next few weeks, my suspicions grew. Daniel's phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter or nightstand, was now always in his pocket or face down on the table. His late nights at work became more frequent, and his excuses grew thinner. One evening, as I was clearing the dinner table, I noticed a faint trace of perfume on his shirt, a scent that wasn't mine. My heart sank, but I told myself it could have come from anywhere. A coworker, a client, even a stray spray from a department store. But deep down I knew better. I started paying closer attention, piecing together the small inconsistencies that had begun to pile up. Daniel's behavior, Vanessa's unusual interest in him, the way their interactions seemed just a little too familiar. It all painted a picture I didn't want to see. Still, I clung to the hope that I was wrong, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But the gnawing feeling in my gut refused to go away. And as much as I tried to push it aside, I knew that something wasn't right. As my suspicions grew, I began noticing more subtle signs of a connection between Daniel and Vanessa. Signs that would have seemed insignificant on their own but together formed an unsettling pattern. It was as though their worlds were gradually overlapping in ways that felt too coincidental to ignore. At work, Vanessa occasionally mentioned Daniel in passing. "How's your husband doing?" she'd ask casually, her tone light but her smile lingering. He seems so passionate about his work. You must be proud of him. At first I chalked it up to polite conversation, but as these comments became more frequent, they began to feel less innocent. Her interest in him seemed just a little too personal, her compliments veering into a territory that felt unprofessional. One afternoon during a team meeting, Vanessa made an offhand comment that sent my heart racing. "Daniel was right," she said, smiling at me across the table. "You really do bring so much dedication to everything you do." I froze, my mind racing. When had they spoken? What had he said about me? I nodded politely, forcing a smile, but my thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt and unease. Later I confronted Daniel about it. "When did you and Vanessa talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "She called me about an event you're organizing," he said with a shrug. "She wanted to make sure I could attend." "No big deal." His answer was plausible, but it did little to ease the sinking feeling in my stomach. The tipping point came during a company retreat. Vanessa had organized a weekend getaway for the leadership team and their partners, and Daniel insisted on coming along. At first I was relieved. His presence would give me some semblance of normalcy in what was bound to be a high-pressure environment. But from the moment we arrived, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Vanessa seemed unusually attentive to Daniel, going out of her way to include him in conversations and activities. At dinner, I noticed the way her gaze lingered on him when she thought no one was looking. The way she laughed at his jokes, her hand brushing his arm as though it were the most natural thing in the world. That night, as Daniel and I returned to our room, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Do you and Vanessa have something going on?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. He turned to me, his expression a mix of surprise and frustration. "What are you talking about?" "She's too familiar with you," I said, struggling to find the right words. "The way she looks at you, the way she talks to you, it doesn't feel right." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Emma, you're imagining things. Vanessa is just being friendly. She's your boss, she's trying to make a good impression." His words were dismissive, and though part of me wanted to believe him, the doubt in my mind refused to be silenced. Over the next few weeks, the tension between us grew. Daniel became more guarded, his phone always locked and his explanations for late nights growing more vague. Vanessa, too, seemed to be testing my boundaries, her comments about Daniel becoming more pointed and personal. "Your husband has such a great eye for detail," she said one day as we reviewed a presentation. "I can see why you two make such a great team." Her words felt like a veiled taunt, a reminder that she knew more about my husband than I was comfortable with. One evening, as I sat in the living room scrolling through emails, I stumbled upon an invitation from Vanessa for a private event. The email had been sent to my personal address, but it was clear that the event wasn't meant for me, it was for Daniel. My heart raced as I reread the email, my mind piecing together the fragments of doubt and suspicion that had been building for months. When I confronted Daniel about the email, his reaction confirmed my worst fears. "It's nothing," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Vanessa invited me because she thought it would be good for networking. That's all." "Networking?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Daniel, why would my boss invite you to a private event without mentioning it to me?" He had no answer, his silence speaking louder than any excuse he could have given. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the weight of betrayal pressed down on me. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they formed was one I didn't want to see. Vanessa wasn't just my boss. She wasn't just friendly with Daniel. She was something more, something I couldn't yet fully prove, but something I was determined to uncover. The night I found the email, I knew I couldn't ignore my suspicions any longer. The unease that had been simmering beneath the surface boiled over into a need for answers. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I started small, paying closer attention to Daniel's behavior. He was increasingly distant, distracted, and jumpy when his phone buzzed. I noticed how he avoided eye contact during conversations and how he often stayed late at work without offering a clear reason. Then there were Vanessa's comments, subtle, calculated, and laced with an undercurrent of something more. Her words felt like breadcrumbs, leading me closer to a revelation I wasn't sure I was ready for. One evening, as Daniel showered, I spotted his phone on the nightstand. The screen was lit up with a notification, a message from Vanessa. My heart pounded as I stared at it, the temptation to unlock it battling with my hesitation. I didn't want to invade his privacy, but his actions had already crossed a line. With trembling hands I picked up the phone and tried a familiar code, our anniversary date. To my dismay it worked. What I found confirmed my worst fears. The messages between Daniel and Vanessa were casual on the surface, but beneath the veneer of professionalism, there were hints of intimacy that made my stomach churn. The messages were laced with emojis, inside jokes, and references to moments I hadn't been a part of. One thread caught my attention. Vanessa, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about it. Daniel, same here. Can't wait for the next meeting, winking face. My hands shook as I scrolled further, each message more damning than the last. There was no room for doubt. This wasn't just an emotional affair. They were fully entangled and they didn't even bother hiding it. I took screenshots of the messages, sending them to my email as evidence. My mind raced with questions and emotions. Anger, betrayal, humiliation. How could they do this to me? How could Daniel, the man I had loved and supported, betray me with the one person I trusted professionally? I spent the rest of the night replaying every moment, every interaction, every sign I had ignored. Vanessa's lingering glances, Daniel's sudden late nights, the subtle shifts in their behavior. It all made sense now. The next day at work, facing Vanessa felt like standing in front of a wolf dressed in sheep's clothing. She smiled at me as though nothing was wrong, as though she wasn't systematically dismantling my life behind closed doors. "Good morning, Emma," she said brightly. "Ready for another productive day?" I forced a polite smile, my stomach churning with the weight of what I knew. "Always," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I spent the day quietly gathering more evidence. Emails, calendar invites, even receipts from company expenses that pointed to unexplained dinners and trips. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of their deceit, and with every discovery my resolve hardened. Confronting Daniel was inevitable. That evening I waited for him to come home, my heart pounding as I rehearsed what I would say. When he walked through the door, his cheerful demeanor only fueled my anger. "How was your day?" he asked, oblivious to the storm he was walking into. "Fine," I said, my voice icy. "But I need to talk to you." He hesitated, sensing the tension in my tone. "What's wrong?" I held up my phone, the screenshots of his messages with Vanessa displayed on the screen. "This," I said sharply. "Explain this, Daniel." His face went pale and for a moment he was silent. Then he stammered, "Emma, it's not what you think. Don't you dare lie to me," I snapped, my voice rising. "I've seen the messages. I know everything." The confrontation was explosive. Daniel tried to downplay the affair, blaming stress, loneliness, and every excuse he could think of. But his words only deepened my anger. "You had a choice," I said, my voice trembling. "You could have talked to me, worked through whatever was bothering you. Instead you betrayed me with her." He had no response, his silence speaking volumes. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to let their betrayal define me or destroy me. I would take control of the situation and I would make them face the consequences of their actions. My first step was to gather every piece of evidence I had, building an airtight case that would expose their affair. But I wasn't just going to confront them privately, I was going to reveal the truth in a way neither of them would forget. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me like a crushing force. Knowing the truth was one thing, but processing it was another. My marriage, my trust in Daniel, and the professional admiration I once held for Vanessa, all of it had been shattered. The nights were the hardest. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment that had led to this revelation. How could I have been so blind? The signs had been there all along. The late nights, the subtle glances, the evasive answers. But I had ignored them, wanting so desperately to believe that my world was still intact. Clara, my best friend since college, was my lifeline during those dark days. She was furious when I told her the truth. "That bastard doesn't deserve you," she said, her voice filled with indignation. "And don't even get me started on Vanessa. What kind of person does this?" I shrugged, too emotionally drained to muster much of a response. "I don't know, Clara. I just feel numb." Work became a battlefield. Every time I walked into the office, I felt Vanessa's presence like a looming shadow. She carried on as if nothing had happened, her smile as polished as ever, her tone as commanding. "Emma, I need those projections by the end of the day," she'd say, her voice clipped but professional. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I held my tongue. I wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, I poured my energy into building my case. Each time Vanessa sent an email or scheduled a meeting, I scrutinized it for inconsistencies or evidence that could tie her to Daniel. I scoured old correspondence, compared schedules, and even monitored her tone during meetings, looking for cracks in her facade. One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by notes and screenshots, Clara stopped by with takeout and a bottle of wine. "You need a break," she said, setting the food down in front of me. "I can't afford to take a break," I replied, my voice tight. "I need to make sure this is airtight." Clara placed a hand on my shoulder, her expression softening. "Emma, I know you're hurt. I know you're angry. But don't let this consume you. You're stronger than this." Her words struck a chord, and for the first time in weeks I allowed myself to cry. The tears came in heavy, uncontrollable waves, each sob releasing a fragment of the pain I had been carrying. The next morning I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. Clara was right, I couldn't let this consume me. But I also couldn't let them get away with what they had done. I began crafting a plan, not just to expose their affair, but to ensure that the fallout would be as public and undeniable as their betrayal had been. At work, I maintained a professional demeanor, even as the tension between Vanessa and me grew. She must have sensed that something was off, but she never let it show. "Emma, you've been quiet lately," she said one afternoon as we reviewed a presentation. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile, my heart pounding with the effort it took to remain calm. "Just busy," I replied. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good. Keep it up. You're one of my best." The audacity of her words made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. Her confidence would be her downfall. Meanwhile, Daniel's attempts to repair our relationship were becoming more desperate. He left notes on the kitchen counter, sent long text messages, and even showed up at my office unannounced. "Emma, please," he begged one evening, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. "I made a mistake, but I love you. We can fix this." I stared at him, my heart aching with a mix of anger and sadness. "Love," I repeated, my voice hollow. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to me, betrayed me, humiliated me." He had no response, his silence confirming what I already knew. As the days passed, my resolve hardened. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was now tempered by a determination to take control of my narrative. Vanessa and Daniel had taken so much from me, my trust, my stability, my sense of self-worth, but I wouldn't let them take my dignity. I was ready to fight back, to expose the truth, and to reclaim the life they had tried to steal from me. The pain of betrayal no longer weighed me down. It fueled me. Every tear I had shed, every sleepless night, every wave of humiliation now transformed into resolve. If Vanessa and Daniel thought they could continue their affair unchecked, they were about to learn otherwise. My plan began to take shape during one of those quiet, contemplative nights when the world outside was asleep. I sat at my desk, reviewing all the evidence I had gathered. Screenshots of their messages, receipts for secret dinners, calendar overlaps that were too convenient to ignore. Each piece was a puzzle fragment, and together they painted a damning picture. But I knew that confronting them in private wasn't enough. They had shattered my world so publicly, it was only fitting that their downfall be equally public. The idea struck me during a meeting at work. Vanessa was presenting an ambitious new project to the entire company, her confidence radiating as she outlined her vision. "This project is a testament to our commitment to excellence," she said, her voice commanding the room. I sat at the back, watching her with a mix of anger and determination. She was so poised, so certain of her untouchable status. But what if, in the middle of her moment of triumph, the truth came to light? The thought sent a thrill through me. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about reclaiming my power. I began meticulously planning the perfect moment to expose them. Vanessa had scheduled a company-wide event to celebrate the project's launch, complete with speeches, presentations, and a Q&A session. It was the kind of high-profile, high-stakes environment where every detail mattered, and where a scandal could ripple through the company like wildfire. With Clara's help, I refined my approach. She was the first person I trusted with my plan, her outrage at their betrayal matched only by her loyalty to me. "You're sure about this?" she asked one evening as we went over the details. "Absolutely," I replied. "They've taken enough from me. It's time to take something back." The first step was ensuring I had irrefutable proof. I spent hours compiling a dossier of evidence, organizing it into a presentation that would leave no room for doubt. Every text message, every email, every piece of correspondence was time-stamped and cross-referenced. Clara, ever the perfectionist, helped me format the evidence into a digital presentation. "If you're going to do this, it needs to be flawless," she said, her tone firm. "It will be," I promised. The night before the event, I rehearsed my delivery in front of Clara. "You've got this," she said, clapping her hands together. "Remember, you're not just exposing them, you're reclaiming your narrative." Her encouragement bolstered me, but as the event approached, I couldn't ignore the nerves that bubbled beneath the surface. This was a gamble, and I had no way of predicting how it would play out. When the day arrived, the atmosphere at the event was electric. Colleagues mingled, drinks were poured, and Vanessa basked in the spotlight, her confidence palpable as she prepared to address the room. I waited for my moment, biding my time as the speeches began. Vanessa stood at the podium, her voice ringing out with authority as she detailed the project's milestones and future goals. "And now," she said, her smile dazzling, "I'd like to open the floor to questions." This was it. My moment. I raised my hand, and Vanessa's smile faltered for the briefest moment as our eyes met. "Emma," she said, her tone cordial but guarded. "You have a question?" "Not a question," I said, standing. My voice was steady, loud enough to carry across the room. "But I do have something to share." As I walked toward the front of the room, the energy in the room shifted. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and Vanessa's composure began to crack. I connected my laptop to the projector and opened the presentation Clara and I had prepared. "This," I said, gesturing to the screen, "is the truth about our esteemed leader and her extracurricular activities." The room went silent as the first slide appeared, a screenshot of an incriminating message between Vanessa and Daniel. I narrated as the slides progressed, each one revealing more evidence of their affair. The audience was riveted, their shock palpable as the scandal unfolded before their eyes. Vanessa's expression morphed from disbelief to fury, her attempts to interrupt drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd. "This is outrageous," she finally exclaimed, her voice shaking. "No, Vanessa," I replied calmly. "What's outrageous is your betrayal, not just to me but to this company and everyone who trusted you." By the time I finished, the room was buzzing with chatter. Vanessa stormed out, her face red with anger and embarrassment. Daniel, who had been conspicuously absent, texted me repeatedly that evening, begging to explain. But I didn't need his explanations. I had done what I set out to do. The day after the company event was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The fallout from my revelation rippled through the office like an unstoppable wave, leaving no corner untouched. Vanessa didn't show up to work that morning, and by mid-afternoon, the company released an internal memo announcing her temporary leave of absence. The euphemism fooled no one. Everyone knew the truth. The boss they had once admired had been caught in a scandal too big to ignore. The whispers in the office were relentless. People spoke in hushed tones around the coffee machine, their curiosity and shock barely concealed. "Did you see the presentation?" one colleague murmured to another. "I can't believe she thought she could get away with it," came the reply. I kept my head down, refusing to engage in the gossip. I didn't regret what I had done, but I didn't feel triumphant either. Exposing Vanessa and Daniel wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my sense of power and dignity. As for Daniel, his response was as predictable as it was infuriating. He bombarded me with texts and calls, alternating between pleas for forgiveness and attempts to justify his actions. "Emma, please let's talk," one text read. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this." Another said, "You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. That was cruel." The audacity of his words made my blood boil. Did he really think I owed him discretion after everything he had done? I ignored his messages, deleting each one as it came through. Vanessa, however, wasn't as quiet. A few days after the event, she sent me an email, her tone oscillating between anger and desperation. "Emma, I don't know what you hope to achieve by humiliating me like that, but you've made your point. Can we at least have a conversation like adults?" I didn't reply. What could she possibly say that would make a difference? She had betrayed me in the worst possible way, using her position of power to manipulate both my professional and personal life. Despite the chaos, Clara was my rock. She celebrated my courage, reminding me that standing up for myself had been the right thing to do. "I'm proud of you, Emma," she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine. "You didn't just expose them. You showed everyone that you're not someone to be underestimated." Her words bolstered my confidence, but they also made me reflect on what I wanted moving forward. Exposing Vanessa and Daniel had been cathartic, but it wasn't the end of my journey. The company's leadership quickly stepped in to contain the damage. Vanessa's absence became permanent when an official announcement confirmed her resignation to pursue other opportunities. In truth, she had been forced out, her reputation irreparably damaged. With Vanessa gone, the company underwent a restructuring, and to my surprise, I was offered her position. "You've proven yourself to be a strong, capable leader," the CEO said during our meeting. "We believe you're the right person to guide this team forward." The offer was tempting, but I hesitated. Did I want to stay in a place that held so many painful memories? After much reflection, I declined the position, choosing instead to resign and start fresh. The decision wasn't easy, but it felt right. I had spent so much of my life tied to this company, to Vanessa, to Daniel. It was time to let it all go. "I'm proud of you," Clara said when I told her. "You're finally putting yourself first." For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. On my last day at work, I packed up my belongings and walked out of the office with my head held high. As I stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The chapter with Vanessa and Daniel was closed, and I was ready to write the next one. A chapter where I was the author of my own story. Leaving the company and closing the chapter on Vanessa and Daniel marked the beginning of a new journey, one of rediscovery and healing. For the first time in years, I had no deadlines to meet, no meetings to attend, and no need to walk on eggshells around people who had betrayed me. The first few weeks felt surreal. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the balcony, watching the sun rise, and my afternoons exploring parts of the city I had neglected in my busy life. Clara insisted on dragging me to yoga classes and art workshops, saying, "You need to reconnect with yourself, Emma. This is your time now." It felt strange at first, allowing myself the freedom to simply exist without the constant pressure to achieve or prove something. But slowly I began to enjoy the quiet moments, the freedom to breathe and reflect. One day, while sorting through old files at home, I stumbled across a journal I had kept during the early years of my marriage. Flipping through its pages, I was struck by the hopeful, ambitious woman I had once been. She had dreams and passions that went beyond her career and marriage, dreams she had let slip away. One entry caught my eye. "One day I want to open my own business, a place where creativity and community come together. Maybe an art cafe, where people can gather, create, and connect." I stared at the words, feeling a flicker of excitement. The idea had been a fleeting dream, something I'd written down and forgotten amidst the chaos of life. But now it felt like a sign, a reminder of the person I had been before everything fell apart. The next day I called Clara. "Do you remember when I used to talk about starting an art cafe?" I asked, my voice filled with tentative excitement. "Of course," she said immediately. "You were obsessed with the idea." "Why? I think I want to do it," I said, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. Clara's enthusiasm was immediate and infectious. "Yes, Emma, this is exactly what you need. Let's make it happen." The process of planning and launching the cafe became my new purpose. I threw myself into every detail, from designing the space to curating the menu to creating workshops and events that would bring people together. Lucas, a local entrepreneur I had met at one of Clara's networking events, became an invaluable mentor and friend. His advice was practical and encouraging, and he often reminded me to trust my instincts. "You've got this, Emma," he said one afternoon as we discussed marketing strategies. "You've already proven how strong and capable you are. This is just the next step." Opening day was a whirlwind of emotions. Friends, family, and curious strangers filled the cafe, their excitement and support palpable. The walls were adorned with local artwork, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and the sound of laughter and conversation created the exact atmosphere I had envisioned. As I stood behind the counter watching the space come to life, I felt a deep sense of pride. This wasn't just a cafe, it was a symbol of my resilience, a tangible representation of how far I had come. The cafe quickly became a beloved community hub, a place where people came to create, connect, and share their stories. I hosted art workshops, book clubs, and open mic nights, each event bringing a new wave of inspiration and connection. And through it all, I felt myself growing, stronger, more confident, and more at peace with who I was. The betrayal that had once defined my life was now nothing more than a stepping stone, a reminder of the strength I had found within myself. One evening as I locked up the cafe, Clara joined me for a late-night coffee. "I'm so proud of you, Emma," she said, raising her mug in a toast. "You've turned something so painful into something beautiful." I smiled, clinking my mug against hers. "It's been a journey," I said. "But I finally feel like I'm where I'm meant to be." As the cafe flourished, so did my sense of self. The broken woman who had once doubted her worth was now a confident, independent business owner, thriving in ways she hadn't imagined. But while my professional life was thriving, I hadn't given much thought to love. It wasn't that I was closed off to the idea. I just wasn't actively looking. My focus was on building the cafe and nurturing the community I had created. Love seemed like something for another time, another version of me. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Lucas, who had been instrumental in helping me launch the cafe, began spending more time there. At first, it was purely professional, discussing business strategies, marketing ideas, and ways to expand. But as we spent more time together, I began to notice the little things. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about his own entrepreneurial journey. The way he encouraged me with thoughtful advice and genuine support. The way he always seemed to know when I needed a pick-me-up, whether it was a cup of coffee or a quiet moment to breathe. One evening, after a particularly successful art workshop, Lucas stayed behind to help me clean up. As we stacked chairs and wiped down tables, the conversation shifted from work to personal matters. "You've created something really special here," he said, his voice warm. "Thank you," I replied, leaning against the counter. "It's been a journey, but I'm proud of it." He smiled, his hazel eyes meeting mine. "You should be. It's a reflection of you, strong, creative, and full of heart." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. Over the weeks that followed, Lucas and I grew closer. He became a regular at the cafe, not just as a mentor but as a friend and something more. Our conversations grew deeper, filled with laughter, vulnerability, and an unspoken connection that seemed to grow stronger with every interaction. Clara noticed it before I did. "You and Lucas, huh?" she said one afternoon, a teasing grin on her face. "What are you talking about?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "Come on, Emma," she said, rolling her eyes. "The way he looks at you. The way you light up when he's around. It's obvious." I brushed her off with a laugh, but her words stayed with me. One evening, Lucas invited me to dinner, not as a business meeting or a casual hangout, but as something more intentional. "I think it's time we step away from the cafe for a bit," he said with a playful smile. "Let me take you somewhere nice." His invitation caught me off guard, but I found myself saying yes without hesitation. The dinner was perfect, intimate, thoughtful, and filled with moments that felt like the beginning of something new. Over candlelight and conversation, Lucas shared his admiration for my resilience and strength. "You've been through so much, Emma," he said, his tone earnest. "And yet you've built something incredible. That's why I admire you, not just for what you've accomplished but for who you are." His words brought tears to my eyes, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the possibility of love again. As the evening ended, Lucas walked me home, the cool night air filled with the sound of our easy laughter. When we reached my door, he hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Emma," he said, his voice soft. "I care about you, a lot. I know you've been hurt before, but I want you to know that I'm here. No games, no secrets, just us." His honesty and vulnerability disarmed me, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. "Lucas," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I care about you too." That night marked the beginning of something beautiful. A relationship built on trust, respect, and mutual admiration. Lucas didn't just love me for who I was. He celebrated the journey that had brought me to this point. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and valued, not for what I had endured but for who I had become. As my relationship with Lucas deepened and my life flourished, I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. But life has a way of testing our resolve, and mine came in the form of an unexpected encounter with my past. It was an ordinary day at the cafe. The soft hum of conversations filled the air, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of pastries. I was behind the counter, chatting with Clara about an upcoming event, when the bell above the door chimed. I glanced up, expecting to see a familiar customer, but my heart froze. Standing in the doorway looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him was Daniel. For a moment time seemed to stand still. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, and I saw a flicker of something, regret perhaps, cross his face. I straightened my shoulders, refusing to let the sight of him rattle me. Clara, ever the protective friend, leaned in. "Do you want me to handle this?" she whispered, her eyes narrowing at him. "No," I said firmly. "I'll take care of it." Daniel approached the counter hesitantly, his once confident demeanor replaced by an air of uncertainty. "Emma," he began, his voice soft and tentative. "Can we talk?" I folded my arms, keeping my expression neutral. "What do you want, Daniel?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I needed to see you." "You've seen me," I replied coldly. "Now if there's nothing else, I have work to do." He winced at my tone but didn't leave. Instead he glanced around the cafe, his gaze lingering on the artwork adorning the walls and the lively atmosphere of the space. "You've done well for yourself," he said, his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Admiration maybe, or envy. "I have," I said simply. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," he continued, his eyes meeting mine. "I just wanted to apologize. For everything. For the lies, the betrayal, all of it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to say it." His words caught me off guard. For years I had imagined what I might say to him if I ever saw him again, but now, faced with his remorse, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. "Daniel," I said after a moment, my voice calm. "I've moved on. I've built a life that has nothing to do with you, and I'm happy. Your apology might mean something to you, but it doesn't change anything for me." He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. "I understand. I wish I could go back and undo it all." "You can't," I said firmly. "What's done is done. The only thing you can do now is learn from it and be better." The conversation ended there. Daniel left quietly, and as I watched him walk away, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. His remorse didn't erase what he had done, but it no longer mattered. I had reclaimed my life, and his presence no longer had the power to shake me. Later that evening, as Lucas and I shared dinner at home, I told him about the encounter. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, his expression filled with genuine concern. "Relieved," I said honestly. "It's like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying has been lifted. Seeing him again just made me realize how far I've come." Lucas reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I'm proud of you, Emma. You've turned so much pain into something beautiful." His words brought a smile to my face, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with my past. With Daniel and Vanessa firmly in my past, I poured my energy into the cafe and my blossoming relationship with Lucas. The cafe had become a community hub, attracting regular patrons and creative minds who found solace and inspiration within its walls. But I wasn't prepared for how far my success would take me. One afternoon, while organizing an upcoming art workshop, I received an email from a prominent lifestyle magazine. The subject line read, "Feature Opportunity. Local business owner transforming lives through art and community." My breath caught as I read through the email. They wanted to interview me, photograph the cafe, and share my story. The journalist explained that they'd heard about the cafe's impact on the community and were eager to highlight it in their next issue. I called Clara immediately. "You won't believe this," I said, excitement bubbling in my voice. "This is huge, Emma," she exclaimed. "You deserve this recognition. Everyone needs to know how amazing you are." The interview was scheduled for the following week. When the journalist arrived, she was warm and enthusiastic, her notebook already filled with questions. "Your story is incredible, Emma," she said as we sat at one of the cafe's cozy corner tables. "Turning pain into purpose. It's inspiring. How did you do it?" I thought for a moment before replying. "I think we all have moments that break us, but those moments don't have to define us. For me, the cafe was a way to reclaim my story and turn something painful into something meaningful." Her eyes lit up as she scribbled notes. "That's powerful," she said. As the article took shape, I reflected on how far I had come. The woman who had once doubted her worth, who had been betrayed and broken, was now being celebrated for her resilience and creativity. It felt surreal, but it also felt earned. When the article was published, the response was overwhelming. People from all over the city and even beyond came to the cafe drawn by the story and the space I had created. Strangers approached me with kind words and shared their own experiences of overcoming adversity. One woman, a single mother, told me, "Your story gave me the strength to keep going. If you can rebuild your life, so can I." Her words brought tears to my eyes. This was more than success. It was connection, the kind of connection I had always dreamed of fostering through the cafe. Lucas was my biggest cheerleader throughout it all. He was there for every milestone, every challenge, and every moment of self-doubt. "You're incredible," he said one evening as we celebrated the article's success with a quiet dinner. "You've turned your story into something that inspires others. That's rare, Emma." I smiled, leaning into him. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. "Don't sell yourself short," he replied, his tone serious. "This is all you." As the cafe's reputation grew, so did the opportunities. Invitations to speak at events, collaborate with other artists, and even expand the cafe began pouring in. Each one felt like a validation of the journey I had been on, a reminder that I was no longer defined by the pain of the past but by the strength I had found in its aftermath. One evening, as I locked up the cafe after another busy day, I paused to look around the space. The walls were adorned with artwork from local artists, the shelves stocked with books donated by patrons, and the tables still carried the warmth of the conversations that had taken place there. I thought back to the woman I had been when Daniel's betrayal first came to light, lost, broken, and unsure of what the future held. That woman felt like a stranger now, a shadow of the person I had become. Lucas joined me as I stood by the door, his arm slipping around my waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Just how far I've come," I said, my voice soft. "I never imagined this would be my life, but I wouldn't change a thing." He smiled, pressing a kiss to my temple. "You've built something extraordinary, Emma. And this is only the beginning." As we walked home together under the glow of the city lights, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the success I had achieved but for the people who had supported me, the lessons I had learned, and the resilience I had discovered within myself. The betrayal that had once defined my life was now just a chapter in a much bigger story. A story of triumph, love, and the power of reclaiming your narrative. Life was beginning to feel like a dream I hadn't dared to imagine. The cafe was thriving, my community was growing, and Lucas and I had built a relationship grounded in trust and mutual respect. But just as I was settling into this new chapter, life threw me another curveball. One evening, as Lucas and I were preparing for a quiet night in, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to find Daniel standing there, looking nervous and out of place. "Emma," he began, his voice hesitant. "I know this is unexpected, but I needed to see you." Lucas appeared behind me, his protective presence reassuring. "Is this a bad time?" Daniel asked, his eyes darting between us. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What do you want, Daniel?" He shifted uncomfortably, his hands stuffed into his pockets. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "About everything, about us. I know I messed up in ways I can't undo, but I needed to tell you how sorry I am. For everything." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard, but I wasn't about to let him derail the life I had worked so hard to rebuild. "I've moved on, Daniel," I said firmly. "I don't need your apology to heal. I've already done that on my own." Lucas stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Emma's worked hard to get where she is," he said, his tone calm but firm. "I think you should respect that and leave her in peace." Daniel nodded, his shoulders slumping. "You're right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I needed to say it." As he turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of closure. His apology didn't erase the pain he had caused, but it confirmed what I already knew, that I had outgrown him and the life we had shared. Later that evening, as Lucas and I sat on the couch, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked, his hand gently brushing against mine. "I am," I said, smiling at him. Seeing him again just reminded me of how much better my life is now. "He's part of my past, but you're my future." His smile was warm and genuine. "I'm glad you see that, because I have something I've been meaning to ask you." Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple yet stunning engagement ring. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've shown me what real strength and love look like. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you'll have me." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "Yes, Lucas, I said, my voice trembling. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The proposal felt like the perfect culmination of my journey, a symbol of the love and happiness I had found after so much pain. It wasn't just about Lucas and me. It was about the life I had rebuilt, the strength I had discovered, and the lessons I had learned along the way. In the weeks that followed, Lucas and I began planning our wedding, a celebration not just of our love but of the life we were building together. Friends and family rallied around us, their support a testament to the community we had created. Clara, of course, took on the role of maid of honor with gusto. This is going to be the wedding of the century, she declared, already scribbling down ideas for the ceremony. As the big day approached, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the struggle to rebuild, it had all led me here to a life filled with love, purpose, and joy. Standing at the altar, looking into Lucas's eyes, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for him but for the woman I had become. I do, I said, my voice steady and full of conviction. And with those words, I stepped into the next chapter of my life, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The weeks after the wedding felt like the calm after a long and tumultuous storm. As Lucas and I settled into our life together, I often found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. A journey filled with heartbreak, resilience, and the discovery of what it truly meant to love and be loved. One quiet evening, I found myself in my studio, surrounded by blank canvases and jars of paint. Lucas had encouraged me to revisit my passion for art, something I had set aside during the chaos of rebuilding my life. As I picked up a brush, memories of the past flooded my mind, not with pain but with clarity. The betrayal, the nights of crying, the moments of self-doubt, they had all shaped me into the person I was now. I began to paint, each stroke capturing a piece of my story. A broken woman finding her strength. A community cafe filled with laughter and creativity. A love that grew from trust and respect. The painting took weeks to complete, but when I finally stepped back to look at it, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The image depicted a woman standing tall amidst a storm, her face serene, her gaze fixed on the horizon. It wasn't just a reflection of my journey, it was a celebration of my growth. When Lucas saw it, he smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "It's beautiful, Emma," he said, wrapping an arm around me. "Just like you." The cafe continued to thrive, and with Lucas by my side, I found new ways to expand its reach. We started hosting charity events, partnering with local organizations to give back to the community that had supported me through my darkest times. One particularly memorable event was a workshop for survivors of betrayal and loss. The participants shared their stories, their pain, and their triumphs, and I found myself deeply moved by their resilience. "I never thought I could find joy again," one woman told me, tears in her eyes. "But seeing what you've built gives me hope." Her words reminded me of why I had started this journey in the first place. Not just to heal myself but to create a space where others could find healing too. As the years passed, I realized that forgiveness was as much a part of my growth as resilience had been. While I would never condone what Daniel or Vanessa had done, I no longer carried the weight of their betrayal. One day as I walked through the city, I spotted Daniel in the distance. He looked older, wearier, and when our eyes met, he gave me a small, hesitant nod. I returned it, feeling no anger or sadness, only a quiet sense of peace. Lucas and I celebrated our first anniversary with a small gathering at the cafe. Friends, family, and patrons joined us, their laughter and love filling the space. As I looked around, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, for the life I had rebuilt, for the people who had supported me, and for the love I had found. During his toast, Lucas raised his glass and said, "To Emma, a woman who turned pain into purpose, who inspires everyone she meets, and who taught me what it means to truly love. Here's to many more years of happiness and adventure." The room erupted into cheers, and as I looked at Lucas, I knew that the chapter we were writing together was only the beginning. In the quiet moments when the cafe was closed and the world seemed still, I would sit by the window with a cup of tea and reflect on how far I had come. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had discovered my strength, my purpose, and my ability to love again. And while the past would always be a part of my story, it no longer defined me. I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who had risen above it, who had reclaimed her narrative, and who had found happiness on her own terms. And for that I was endlessly grateful.